Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're putting on our analytical researcher hats to investigate a massive and honestly a fascinating puzzle. You see, before we even look at the numbers behind a nation's wealth and total output, we have to navigate a maze of really tricky definitions. It's a topic we're calling, exactly as it sounds, theoretical difficulties or conceptual difficulties.
That's right, because measuring a nation's income, it's easily one of the most intellectually demanding jobs in macroeconomics. I mean, before the statisticians can even start counting the money, we run headfirst into some intense conceptual gray areas that genuinely make you question what wealth really is.
Okay, so let's dive into this. We're looking at a massive, complex machine here, right? Agriculture, stock markets, global trade, transportation, manufacturing, the whole shebang. As our sources point out, a modern economy is fundamentally a money economy. And because of that, a country's national income is always expressed in terms of money.
Right. It represents the total flow of goods and services produced in an economy during a single year. The main goal here is to capture the net aggregate value of this entire humming machine. But, as you'll see in just a moment, pinning down that exact monetary value is far from simple.
Which leads us to a seemingly innocent question. How do we actually measure the entire modern money economy? Well, the National Income Committee defines this as measuring the volume of commodities and services turned out during a given period, counted without duplication.
Sounds easy enough on paper, but before we even get to the math, we hit those major theoretical headaches we mentioned. We literally have to sit down and decide what actually counts as a good or a service in the first place and what is just money shuffling around. So let's look at our first major hurdle.
Researcher A, number 1, the transfer payment paradox. So this first conceptual gray area deals with government expenditures. We're talking about things like old age pensions, unemployment allowances, scholarship funds, or charity. Here's the paradox we face. On one hand, an individual receives this cash, and to them, it's absolutely considered personal income. It's money in their pocket.
Exactly. But then you flip it and look at the economy as a whole. From a macroeconomic perspective, the economy produces zero fresh output in return for this cash. The person receiving it hasn't manufactured a new product or performed a current service to earn that specific transfer of funds in this accounting year. It's simply a transfer of income, usually collected via taxes, from one part of the economy to another. So, to avoid double counting, economists have to safely categorize and then completely ignore these transfer payments when calculating national income.
Moving on to number 2, value of unpaid services and the non-monetized sector. This leads us to an even deeper philosophical and economic dilemma. What happens when highly valuable, absolutely essential work is performed, but it's completely disconnected from a market price? Let me ask you this relatable textbook question. Does a mother's labor have a price tag? Just think about the sheer effort it takes to teach a child, cook meals, clean, and manage a household. If you hire a professional tutor or a restaurant chef, that labor is paid for, tracked, and happily added to the gross domestic product. Right, but when a mother or, any family member does that exact same labor for their own household, no money actually changes hands. So the crucial point here is this. For the purpose of calculating national income, only paid goods and services are considered. Services done out of love, affection, mercy, sympathy, or charity are just entirely omitted from national income. Even though these unpaid services are literally the bedrock of a functioning society, because they lack a clear market price tag, our standard economic formulas are completely blind to them. And expanding on that blind spot, we also have to account for the non-monetized sector. Remember, national income only represents those goods and services which are actually exchanged for money. But what about rural barter trades? Say a farmer swaps wheat for clothing directly with a neighbor, without ever using currency. That highly productive economic activity falls completely off the accounting radar. Economists do try to compensate by doing some guesswork, making these imputed value estimates for goods that farmers produce for their own self-consumption. But relying on guesswork naturally introduces a massive margin of error into our grand national total. Which brings us to number 3, changing price levels and foreign income flows. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer danger of changing price levels. Look at how numbers can shift without a single drop of fresh output. If you evaluate output using market prices, you absolutely have to factor in inflation. Imagine an economy produces exactly the same number of shirts and wheat this year as it did last year. The actual production volume is identical. However, if the general price level has doubled just due to inflation, the total monetary value of that output will also double.
Yeah, so on paper, it looks like massive economic growth.
But in reality, the country isn't producing anything more. Things are just more expensive. Economists must meticulously take changes in price levels between different years into account so they aren't fooled by this apparent growth. Then, of course, we add the massive headache of international borders. To find the gross national product, we rely on two critical accounting formulas. Step 1 is calculating the net export value, which is exports minus imports, or X minus M. Step 2 is calculating net receipts from abroad, meaning receipts from abroad minus payments made abroad, or R minus P.
And tracking multinational corporate earnings across all those varying international rules, it's incredibly tough.
Exactly. Trying to distinguish between what is produced by residents domestically versus what those same residents earn overseas requires exceptionally precise data collection. And that opens up entirely new avenues for conceptual difficulties. Finally, we hit number 4, the environmental headache, green GNP. As our global awareness evolves, we've encountered a distinctly modern theoretical difficulty. Notice the contrast here. Traditional gross national product will eagerly count all the money generated by heavy industrial smokestacks while completely ignoring the depletion of the natural capital it took to get there. I mean, a mere increase in GNP doesn't reflect a true improvement in the quality of life if it heavily increases environmental pollution or strips away natural resources for future generations. If we cut down an entire forest and sell the timber, traditional metrics celebrate the income, but totally ignore the permanent loss of the environment. So, to fix this conceptual headache, economists are now championing something called green GNP. It's defined as an indicator of the sustainable use of the natural environment and the equitable distribution of the benefits of development. The measurement basically tries to correct that huge blind spot. Green GNP equals traditional GNP minus the net fall in the stock of natural capital plus the pollution load. It's a vital step toward ensuring economic development promotes welfare for a long, long time without causing severe environmental degradation. So, after examining all these blind spots, you might be wondering, why do we even bother? Well, let's look at this quote directly from our source material. National income is a composite measure of all economic activities, but is also an objective indicator of economic welfare. Despite the transfer payment paradox, the invisible unpaid labor, the distorting mirror of inflation, and the massive environmental headaches, we desperately need these imperfect metrics. They are still the most robust, objective foundation we have to actually gauge the economic health and welfare of a nation's people over time. But as we've uncovered today, the data is really only as good as the concepts behind it. So we'll leave you with this final thought to ponder. If our headline economic numbers inherently exclude acts of love and charity, if they ignore the value of clean air, and if they struggle to account for basic self-sufficiency, what are we really measuring when we talk about a nation's wealth? As analytical researchers, it's our job to always look past the final number and critically question the data behind the headlines. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer. Keep asking those hard questions, and we'll see you next time.